And welcome back to another episode of Journaling Through Life Home Edition. Today we are speaking to Kristi. She is the Executive Director and founder of Courage to Caregivers in Ohio. Kristi, how are you? How are things in Ohio?
We're here, we're doing the best we can, and everybody's still sheltering in place here. So everybody's working from home.
Is there any update on when that's not going to be shelter in place anymore?
I think that they opened Ohio. For instance, our daughter went back to her nonprofit for work today. They opened offices as long as they can keep their employees safe. And some of the people that we work with, they've been like half their workforce. So the workplaces opened up today, as a matter of fact, the first day. And I think that there's a very slow opening here to Ohio over the next month, likely. So people are taking it slow, but they're trying to be safe and responsible for all of their employees. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And the caregivers that you work with, how has that changed? Because we were talking about this, now they are the frontline workers, they are the caregivers. Like there's so much emphasis on them. So can you tell us a bit about, what you have found, how it has changed for them?
right. Well, what the caregivers that we serve are family caregivers primarily. And so they are all now sheltering in place. And I think their first fear, the first week, now that we're into week 8, the first week they were worried about their loved one services. So all those services that their loved ones took advantage of, counseling, therapy, day programs, even places of residence, they were worried about the safety and the security, if you will, of their loved ones. And then as many of them came home to work, then they're all together in one place. And I would say that what's probably changed for them is that it's just like you were to hear parents with young children who are all out there saying, hey, I'm trying to work and I'm also trying to parent. And so we serve caregivers with their relationships with their loved ones are everything from small children, adolescents, young adults. Sometimes they're taking care of their parents in their home. And so suddenly everybody's at home. So their space is very small and their time is very divided and fractured. And then as well, some of those relationships, because they're all so close right now, can be very volatile. So that we've got some people who just don't feel safe at home any longer as caregivers. And so that's been hard too, is trying to keep them safe.
Right, right. That's
Yeah,
something that we don't even think about, right? That physical
right.
safety and I
Hmm.
find even in my own home, right, where everybody is on a different wavelength. Like usually
Yeah.
when you have your routine in your normal life, you sort of know what to expect, but now everybody has to deal with all their emotions. So how do you support them if they don't feel like they are safe in their homes?
Well, we asked them to, when we quickly morphed to a new virtual format, we asked them to sign a new privacy pledge. And it basically says that they agree to be the only ones in the room and we're on Zoom, just like this. So they agree to be the only one in the room. And so, and I think that while we don't talk about our loved ones in general, there are days and times where they just need to vent. And we usually start every week with, how are you doing? Just like you, right? How are you coping? How are you managing? And often it will go to that. So they want to do that with the confidentiality that it's a private space and that the people that they're sharing with are also in a private space. And that's been hard to find that. We call it a sanctuary. Find your sanctuary within your home. And so for a handful of people, that's been very hard. And so we said, go to your car. Just go to your car. And it was cold those first couple of weeks. It was cold. And we had a few people taking our Zoom calls from their car. And they even have to be in their car alone. They can't have anyone in their car with them. So finding a sanctuary has been a barrier for some people to our program. So that's been hard.
Of course, of course. And my mind was just thinking, like, what if you're a parent that has to take care of small children? There's not other support, and you have to take care of elderly parents. Like, there's so many dynamics that you have to work with,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now,
Oh, right.
right? and with your extensive experience in giving courage to caregivers, what are some of the basic things that people can do if they can find a sanctuary, but if they are not in, for example, with your, non-for-profit, like what can they sort of do to help alleviate some of that stress?
Right. Well, and that's exactly it, right, Christina? It's stress. So for us, it's understand your stress. So really, what causes you stress is likely not what causes me stress, right? So just really understanding. We have one of our breathing meditation facilitators who always likes to say, nice noticing. So just notice, like, what causes you stress? Where do you feel that stress in your body? And so for a lot of us who are on computers now all the time, or our phones, we might get like a neck or back, or, maybe it's your gut, or maybe your breathing is shallow. So just really understanding what causes you stress and what it starts to feel like, because then when you notice that stress, then you're going to be able to start putting some things into place before. And really, we see ourselves in the caregiver burnout prevention business. And that's probably new language since the last time you and I talked, because what we were finding is people were finding us in moments of crisis. And if we can just get out ahead of caregiver burnout and start a little earlier with them, that's how we see ourselves, the caregiver burnout prevention business. So when we can identify what causes us stress, what that feels like, and there's pretty normal kind of compassion fatigue that comes into play with caregivers, parents, family members, any of those caring relationships. And I would argue that everyone in this world is a carer, right? We're all providing care to someone that we love. And so compassion fatigue and a little bit of stress is normal. So, going to a zero stress level is not realistic. That's how we are still here as humans, right? A little bit of stress has kept us alive. And yet too much stress is where you start to go beyond compassion fatigue to caregiver burnout. So when you can understand your stress, notice it, notice what it does to your body, notice where you feel it, then over time, because you've kept track of those causes and triggers and things that are doing that, then it allows you to give better, more healthy coping techniques. Like, oh, I'm starting to ramp up, right? Or you knew tonight that you wanted some quiet for this conversation. So you knew in advance. You didn't have to scream at anyone outside of the room where we're both talking. You sent them on a walk. You anticipated that. You had the expectation. And so just realizing that, you came on very relaxed and very calm, because we're going to have a lovely, quiet conversation because we can. And so for me, it's time in nature, like just stepping out into the fresh air and seeing the sunshine. Now that this weather's starting to change, changes my outlook entirely. I love to work in the garden. So identifying the things that can change my attitude and my frame of mind, just taking a walk. I mean, I can get ramped up pretty fast. And so when I start to do that, I'm like, I think it's just time I shut down the laptop and go take a walk, spend that time in nature. Nature is definitely a sanctuary for me. Sometimes talking about it. So when you're working with a team of colleagues and you're entirely remote, just saying, after 5 emails, nothing productive is happening in this loop anymore. Just pick up the good old phone, right? Pick up the phone and call that person. Connecting with a real human. We've never been so connected and yet feel so alone. And so just being able to look into each other's eyes right now even is just so comforting to have another human connection and meet in this way. So that's the first thing I would say. Understand your stress. That's like my first. I'm loaded with tips, but that's my first one.
And that's why we have you on the show, because you're loaded with tips and you're an amazing person. Oh, Kristi, that's amazing. Yes. And I think, as much as we were on our phones previous, the energy has shifted. When you're now on a phone, it's not people just posting selfies and, this and that and the other thing of where they've been. It's like now we're faced to sort of look at ourselves more deeply. And I think connecting to what you said, like stress is the same. It's not going to be what triggers me, triggers you, how this all works together. You need to understand yourself first and foremost, right?
Right.
That's amazing. Now, have you done any of the trauma parts with the caregivers? Because that's sort of like a second part to this, right? The burnout, the
Right.
traumas.
Right. And so we see ourselves as a trauma informed agency in the sense that we work with trauma informed best practices. Since we're a brand new nonprofit, and because of what we do, we're not yet accredited, and we hope to be one day as we continue to grow and develop. So for now, we're basing ourselves in trauma informed best practices. So understanding what is trauma, and then to balance that out, what is resilience, has been really important to us. And I think when we can frame a caregiver's role as trauma, it helps them to understand, oh, this isn't just, I'm reticent to use the word normal, but that understanding what trauma is really important to your journey as a caregiver. So basically, trauma is the brain, anything that overwhelms the brain's ability to cope. It's just that basic. And so again, what's been traumatizing to you, and I know we've talked about this and shared this over the years, and yet what's traumatizing to me is very different, and yet all very valid. My daughter's favorite quote that I use over and over again is, there's no winner in the trauma Olympics. Because how often do you talk to people and it's like, oh, you think that's bad? Oh my gosh, Christine, let me tell you about my story, right? Everybody wants to one up your trauma story. And you're like, okay, so you win. I mean, what?
For you. Good for you.
No,
Congratulations.
right,
There's no
exactly.
medals.
And there's none, trust me, in this. And trust me, there's no way to. So there's a couple different examples or events or circumstances that I think we could all agree to, right? So physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, a sudden separation from a loved one, so like a sudden traumatic end to someone's a relationship there, childhood neglect, poverty and discrimination. Yet right at the top of most lists of what is traumatic is having a family member with a mental health disorder. Right there at the top. That is trauma. I would also argue that all of us in collective humanity right now are faced with another trauma. That's this pandemic. This is literally traumatizing, and it's okay to call it trauma because it's fair. It's literally changing everyone's ability to cope. Their brains have had to adjust to a whole new way of life, and the uncertainty of it just says, I don't know what tomorrow will bring. And so literally this pandemic is traumatizing. And what they are predicting is that there will be PTSD examples coming out of this as we emerge. And I think it's really valid for us to literally affirm someone that what you're experiencing is trauma and its effect on your body, right? So, and then for everything that trauma is, resilience is our ability to bounce back. It's literally how you bounce back. It's that simple. And so there's all kinds of qualities, and we talk about having resilient superpowers. And I happen to know you have a lot of resilient superpowers, but identifying what is your resilient superpower is really important to your own affirmation that I can do trauma because I can and I will bounce back. Plain and simple.
That sounds like a journaling prompt just waiting to happen.
I think you could think of a few. I'm sure you could think of a few.
Oh, I love that. And it's interesting that you said mental health is like the number one trigger because, and I'm just, thinking aloud here. If you have a sudden event, it happens, you can deal with it,
Right.
and there's an end point. But with mental health, it's so varied. And if you have a mental health disorder, it's likely going to be, you can treat the symptoms, but it's like anything else. It's not likely going to go away. And I can say that for myself, being diagnosed with complex PTSD, I know that's a trigger. And I'm like, and I manage it, but it's a part of me. It'll never really go away because of what happened to me, right? So I think there is that depth too that people have to, like you said, you don't want to use the word normal, but I think if we understand what is going to happen, what are we going to expect? Then it gives us a little bit of control back. And then we can use our resiliency, like you said, to sort of, I've got this. It's okay. I've dealt with this before. Now, in terms of the resiliency, are there any specific tips that how would I know what my superpower is? How would I find that?
So I think everybody knows a resilient person. Like you look and you're like, oh, that person is just so resilient. So, and basically resiliency is defined as mentally or emotionally coping with a crisis and then returning to that pre-crisis status quickly. So I think we can all identify someone who has done that. And I have always appreciated looking at resiliency as something that is a mindset so that it can be taught or learned. So it's not something, often people think, oh, they're born with that, right? And so those are those people. No, no, no. Everyone has that ability, just like a growth mindset. So resiliency is a mindset. It can be taught or learned. And that's actually how we deliver our program. We have a 52-week program, a curriculum for our programs. And we are coaching each week a different tool that builds resilience in caregivers. So my personal favorite is hope, because with that sense of hopefulness, and it's hope is way beyond just a positive mindset, but that literally hope that the promise of a new day. I know that when I go to bed, tomorrow is a new day. Now, every day is not promised to me, and I do understand that too, but tomorrow will be a new day and will be a reset, and it's a chance for another fresh start. So that hope, that keeps me driven and fueled. Hope is without a doubt one of my favorite resilient superpowers. I think that some other examples are things like mindfulness, which I know is important to you too. So just being mindful in that moment and present and aware is a resilience component. I think having positive relationships in your life and knowing who those positive relationships are, who's been a good mentor or partner or coach or someone you can go to. It could even be a professional support, someone on your team. Self-care, and I know you're a huge fan of self-care too, but self-care is an important component to resilience. And then living your life with purpose and meaning is a really critical component to resilience. And I think we often think, oh, that's just too hard. Like it's too complicated or too much or too, I don't know, something, but it's a very, very important component to resilience and building your resilience and your tools of that resilience. So.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And as you were talking, I remember our previous episode was with a financial planner, and he said, it's never too late to start a financial plan. And I feel like the same principle can be applied to us. It's never too late to start the resiliency. We always, like you said, see the people who have it seemingly all figured out, but they have spent years and experienced so much, right? But we should never feel like, we're not good enough to start it. I think, that's an important thing for people to remember as well. You can have a tiny bit of hope every morning. You don't have to, write a book about
Baby
it. You
steps.
can,
Baby steps.
absolutely. But, and be so kind to yourself and the self-care, definitely. I think that's a word that gets sort of confusing for people at some point as well. Right? I've heard some in mind that it's like, I know it's not selfish, but, and then they start all these excuses. But like you said, you can't give what you don't have. So if you don't have the energy, if you don't have the hope within yourself, how are you going to, live that balanced life?
Right.
Right.
Right. Or be there for your loved one. Right. So if you don't take care of yourself, as you said, you can't pour from an empty cup. You just can't. So if you are not taking care of yourself, if you just aren't, then you'll be of no good to the people who are counting on you to be fully present.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I know that we have a large caregiver following, right? Now, the programs that you are doing now, you were saying you have the resiliency one. Are there any other programs that people can sign up for that, because it sounds so wonderful. It sounds like, everybody needs to do it. Everybody just needs to sign up.
Well, right. And so while we primarily focus on family caregivers, right, it allows them, we don't check credentials at the door. We don't. So if you come to me and you say, your mission sounds amazing. Your program sounds like exactly what I'm looking for. I'm not going to check your credentials. I will ask for a registration and a waiver, but I'm not going to say, oh, You get to come in because you fit and you do not, right? So it's basically acceptance of your present situation brings you to me. It takes so much courage to take that first step and acknowledge that you are looking for help. That I know how much that takes, so you are welcome with open arms. We also have served professional caregivers. We have also served, we have some people supporting parents. So, aging parents with dementia or Alzheimer's, which again falls under that umbrella of a brain difference. I will tell you that I'm right back at being an active caregiver, even though I lost my brother, who was my first care receiver, if you will. My son has a traumatic brain injury. So again, do I qualify? It's a brain difference. Again, not checking those cards at the door. All of our tools still fit and would serve people with all of those scenarios. We're also we provide presentations when we're able to go into workplace again to counselors and social workers and case managers. And we look to serve professional caregivers because it's the same concept. It's very much the same concept for family caregivers as professional caregivers, and that same sense of compassion fatigue leading to caregiver burnout, that companies do like to provide those holistic services for their employees. But we also know, especially right now with COVID-19, there's just not enough time in the day. So serving professional caregivers is really important part to what we do because we need them to be strong and healthy too. So we serve anyone who is tired and looking for support and looking to build, again, those tools. We look to ourselves as coaches, basically coaching those components to resilience.
I just love that. And before this meeting, I remembered that when we sort of both started our endeavors roughly around the same time. My books just started, and you just started the non-for-profit. And I remember you saying that you reached out to me, and then I responded back because I was so happy. I'm like, yay, somebody is like responding to me. Somebody bought my book. This is fantastic. Right. And I think, that'll always stick with me that, we're sometimes so afraid to ask. And it's like, we're like, oh, what are they going to think? What are they going to say? Where's the judgment? I'm like, you know what? You could just ask.
Right. No. Oh my gosh. And then that connection, right? Here you are in Canada and I'm here in Ohio, and I'm thinking to myself, and you've been a mentor through this every phase of our journey for our nonprofit, and to see how you've grown and adapted. But again, it's that important connection, human connection, right? We're all hardwired to connect, and you seeing that viability in what we do and us seeing in you what you provide, looking to those intersections, I think is just that beautiful part of, and we connected through social media. I mean, so who knew?
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think especially in this time, like you said, we're connected, but that seeing each other face to face, or just knowing that there's another person out there that has similar, kind of ideas and stresses, and people are going, like you said, globally through these things. The best we can do is support them, but also support ourselves. Now, I noticed too that on your social media, speaking of which, and everybody will check it out, and I will put all of the links in the description. You have also included journaling in some of your, social
Right.
media. Can you please tell us about that?
I would be happy to. So, you taught me so much about the, I will say there's evidence-based research about the benefits to journaling for caregivers and caregiver burden and stress and all of those wonderful things. And of course, you coached me through our model for journaling. And while that did not make the cut for our 3 pilots of our programs, we incorporated, right? So we did that. We did a whole model of journaling therapy, if you will, as one of our proposed program models. But we proposed 6 programs, and there was no way to pilot 6 programs. I mean, So we chose 3. It did not make that cut. And yet we realized the holistic wellness, if you will, and value of journaling. And so I thought to myself, there can be a journaling component to every week of our curriculum. So the other thing I love to talk about is goals, and how setting goals, and especially during a pandemic, to provide that structure for our days that are really unstructured are so critical to your recovery, if you will. So every week, based on the curriculum, I create a journal prompt and put it out there. And I also put out a goal. And I don't create the goal for you. I basically give you the direction for what could you set a goal around this piece of our curriculum for this week. So every week there's a new journal prompt, and you helped us to get to there to see how important that was. And it's created quite a dialogue on social media, which I was an unintended, outcome, I would say, of just people who are willing to share, because those journal prompts don't have to be, 10 pages long. They can be bullet journals, paragraphs, or just ideas. So I love that they're willing to share that too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And you know
Yeah.
what? You and I have been so back and forth together with so many ideas and so many growths that, when you mentioned that, I'm like, well, yeah, right, right. That
You
was
forgot.
also a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. So yes, we believe
Oh.
in it. We believe in it. Absolutely.
Oh, that is so amazing. And I think that sharing part is part of that healing process. Like you said, the moment that you take it from your heart and you put it out into paper,
Mhm.
and then you get that distance, you see, you can read it back to yourself, and then to share it with the community. I think that is so inspirational. I heard a quote
Mhm.
from somebody that also said, you don't have to be the expert, you can just contribute to the conversation. And by doing that, you will inspire, you will empower. And I
Mhm.
thought that was
Mhm.
so incredible.
Yeah. No, that's a little bit. That's how I started. Basically, every time I went to share my story of supporting my brother living with severe mental illness and being his long distance caregiver, I thought I was doing it to heal myself, but I actually brought hope and healing to every other person sitting there who was like, I've been there. I get it. And if she's able to stand here and talk about that all these years, at that point it was new. So every time I spoke about it, I got a little stronger. But it was also by virtue of the fact that everyone around me was also getting stronger by sharing the story. I just think it's so powerful.
Absolutely. And bringing it back to the conversation that we have, because we're in our homes now and we have a
Hmm.
pandemic and normal is no longer normal. I think sharing our stories, especially now, is so important, right? And the
Hmm.
caregivers too. Like I said, I think it's such a beautiful community. And being from Africa, my mom worked in the caregiver communities too. That's why this journal was so close to her heart as well. Just seeing, really the angels down on earth and just helping. And I hope that every caregiver that watches this knows that we appreciate you. We appreciate everything that you do,
Hmm.
families or professional capacity.
Right.
It's very, I think it's underrated. And for one thing, I'm actually glad that now the frontline workers, the people who are really making a difference, are getting the resources they need. They are sort of getting, much more empowerment and much more tools that can help them, and through
Hmm.
organizations like yours.
Well, it's interesting you say that. So the first thing that comes to mind is me reminding caregivers all the time that you're never alone, right? So you're never alone in your pain, in your worry, in your concern, in your joy, but mostly in your pain, right? You're just never alone. There's always someone there, and yet you feel so alone. Um, Yesterday, I just happened to be sharing something from my garden with a frontline healthcare worker, and she said, and I said to her, "Thank you, thank you for being on the front line and serving, and for being there for so many people." And she says, and I didn't call her a hero, but someone must have called her a hero along the way. And she goes, I'm a little uncomfortable with everybody calling me a hero right now. And I said, oh my gosh, like this is your chance, right? Like get your cape out or I'll get you one. And I'm so proud of you. And she said, yeah, but I'm doing what I went to school to do. I'm doing what I was called to do. I'm doing what I was meant to do, which is provide professional care to someone. And there's no greater honor or privilege than providing care to someone, in their critical care needs, and potentially as they're, dying, as you're losing someone. There's just no greater, and those patients are doing it alone. And yet they have these beautiful carers as frontline workers who are there with them. And it's horrible and hard on them, but they don't see themselves as heroes. They just see themselves as doing the job that they are called to do, which I love. I love that. That's that deep purpose and meaning, right? That shows resilience.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're connecting to that core part of yourself, that what you were placed on this earth to do. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, I
So,
love that. That's beautiful.
yeah.
Now, Kristi, if somebody wanted to look into your programs, you're running all these virtual programs, correct? And can
Yes,
they
we
just
are.
find it on your website? And I know you're a non-for-profit too, so can you tell us how we can help you?
Oh, you're so kind. So yes, they can find us on our website, couragetocaregivers.org. On there are all of our virtual programs. We offer peer support to caregivers one-on-one. So that's that chance to have that shared live experience and we've trained volunteers to just be really great listeners for another caregiver in need. Then we also have 2 programs that typically have met in person but are now on Zoom. And those are breathing meditation, which is 1 hour of just us filling their cup of a meditation that's, again, all guided and focused on the curriculum. It's followed by a support group. You can do one or either or both. And those are in 3 different days and times based on where they are and when they might be available. They can fill out a quick form where we will have a conversation, because we found that setting expectations is a really important part to onboarding them for their programs. And, we're on social media. They can follow us on Instagram or Facebook, and we do a weekly inspirational email. It's meant to be inspirational, all based on the curriculum, where we pour out resources and community partners and materials. And this month is May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so there's lots of focus on tools for your toolkit as a mental illness caregiver. So they could sign up for our email and start there.
That's amazing. And how can they contribute to you? I know Amazon Smile, that's still one. Are you still on that one?
We are still on Amazon Smile, so everyone should be shopping through smile.amazon.com and picking your charity of choice. We would be happy to be their charity of choice. We get a small percentage of your Amazon shopping. They can also make a contribution on our website. Tomorrow is actually a brand new Giving Tuesday now for all of us who are responding amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And so there'll be a big campaign tomorrow on social media as well as our website. And then, all contributions are impactful because we are a small nonprofit. So contributions, small or large, make a big difference when you're a small agency. So
I love
we
that.
appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you
And
for helping us get the word out.
of course. I think in this, not just this pandemic, but we should really, help each other out. We are really hashtag in this together. That's
Yes,
really, really
without a
what.
doubt.
Absolutely. And I think, from a personal perspective, say if you're not a person, but you're watching this video and you're not in a caregiver capacity, if you contribute and you know that your money at least is making a difference, that is something, good that you're doing. It's good karma. It's also good for your mental health to know that you're contributing to the greater good.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right? So that's
Thank
amazing.
you.
Excellent. Well, Kristi, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Mm-hmm.
You have so much information. It is absolutely always a pleasure to speak to you. And I will put all of the links down below in the description.
Great.
Excellent. Well, thank you,
Thank you.
Kristi. We'll chat again
Yeah.
soon.
Thanks for catching up. Thanks for having me with you. I appreciate it.
Are you a family caregiver or a professional caregiver? We have a premium guided journal just for you. Find it on journalingthrough.life. Keep journaling and keep growing.